The last takeaway in Croydon, in the heart of Croydon, where the streets buzzed with life and the air was thick with the scent of fast food. There was a small takeaway that had seen better days. It was called The Last Takeaway, a name that had once been a quirky joke, but now felt like a grim prophecy. The neon sign flickered erratically, casting an eerie glow on the cracked pavement, and the windows were perpetually smeared with grease and condensation. The takeaway was owned by an elderly man named Mr. Grayson, who had run the establishment for over 30 years. He was a fixture in the community, known for his gruff demeanor and his secret recipes that had drawn locals in for decades. But lately, something had changed. The once bustling shop had begun to see fewer and fewer customers, and whispers of strange happenings began to circulate among the residents. On a chilly autumn evening, three friends, Tom, Sarah, and Jake, decided to venture into the Last Takeaway. After hearing rumors about its infamous mystery meat burger, they were drawn by a mix of curiosity and a dare that had been thrown around at the pub. Earlier that night, as they pushed open the door, a bell jingled overhead, sounding more like a warning than an invitation. The interior was dimly lit, with peeling wallpaper and flickering fluorescent lights that buzzed ominously. The smell was overwhelming, a mixture of fried food and something else. Something metallic that made their stomachs churn. Mr. Grayson stood behind the counter, his eyes narrowing as he regarded the trio. "What do you want?" he grumbled, his voice raspy from years of shouting orders over the fryer. "We'll have 3 mystery meat burgers," Tom said, trying to sound brave despite the unease creeping up his spine. "Coming right up, Mr. Grayson replied, turning away to prepare their order. As he worked, the friends exchanged uneasy glances. There was something unsettling about the way he moved, as if he were performing a ritual rather than cooking. While they waited, Sarah noticed a series of photographs hanging on the wall behind Mr. Grayson. They were faded and yellowing, depicting the takeaway in its heyday, families smiling with their meals, children laughing, and Mr. Grayson looking younger and more vibrant. But as she examined them more closely, she noticed something odd. Each photo had a figure lurking in the background, a shadowy silhouette that seemed to grow darker and more pronounced with each passing year. "Hey, guys, look at these pictures," Sarah said, pointing to the wall. Tom leaned in closer. "What's that? Is someone standing there?" Jake shrugged it off. Probably just some random customer in the background. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more sinister at play. Just then, Mr. Grayson returned with their burgers, placing them on the counter with an unsettling thud. The patties were oddly shaped and glistened under the fluorescent lights. "Enjoy," he said flatly before turning back to the fryer. The trio sat down at a small table in the corner, their burgers steaming in front of them. They exchanged hesitant smiles before taking their first bites. The taste was unlike anything they had ever experienced, rich and savory, but also strangely metallic. As they chewed, a sense of dread settled over them. "What is this?" Jake asked, his voice muffled by food. "Not sure," Tom replied, swallowing hard. "But it's kind of good." Suddenly, the bell above the door jingled again, and a group of teenagers burst in, laughing loudly. They ordered their food with boisterous confidence and quickly settled into a booth nearby. Mr. Grayson served them with a scowl, but seemed to take extra care with their orders. As the friends continued eating, they overheard snippets of conversation from the teenagers. "Did you hear about that guy who went missing last week?" one of them said. "Yeah, they say he was last seen near this place," another replied with a laugh. "I wouldn't be caught dead here." The laughter faded as they noticed Mr. Grayson glaring at them from behind the counter. "Mind your business," he snapped. The teenagers fell silent, exchanging nervous glances before hastily finishing their meals and leaving. The atmosphere in the Last Takeaway grew heavier as night fell outside, shadows creeping through the windows like fingers reaching for them. Let's get out of here, Sarah suggested, her voice trembling slightly. But before they could leave, Mr. Grayson called out to them. You kids aren't leaving until you finish your burgers. Tom glanced at his half-eaten meal and felt a wave of nausea wash over him. We're done, he said firmly. Not until you've paid, Mr. Grayson replied, his tone darkening. Reluctantly, they pulled out their wallets and paid for their meals, but as they turned to leave, they noticed something strange. The door wouldn't budge. It felt as though it was locked from the outside. What's going on? Jake exclaimed, panic rising in his voice. Mr. Grayson stepped closer, his eyes glinting in the dim light. You didn't think you could just walk away after tasting my secret recipe, did you? The friends exchanged horrified looks as realization dawned on them. The rumors about the last takeaway weren't just stories, they were warnings. Let us go, Sarah shouted, backing away from the counter. But Mr. Grayson only chuckled softly, a sound that sent chills down their spines. You'll understand soon enough. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently before plunging them into darkness. The friends screamed as they stumbled towards the door, but it remained stubbornly shut. In the pitch blackness, they could hear Mr. Grayson moving around them, his footsteps echoing ominously. Help! Somebody help us! Tom yelled desperately. Just then, a faint light flickered back on, illuminating Mr. Grayson standing eerily still behind the counter with a sinister grin on his face. You see, he said slowly, the secret ingredient to my burgers is not what you think. Before they could process his words, shadows began to swirl around them, coalescing into dark shapes that seemed to reach for them with claw-like hands. Panic surged through the trio as they realized they were not alone in the last takeaway. Run! Jake shouted as he charged towards the door again, slamming his shoulder against it in a futile attempt to escape. But it wouldn't budge. Mr. Grayson's laughter echoed through the shop as he revealed a hidden compartment beneath the counter, filled with strange jars and containers labeled with names that sent shivers down their spines. Essence of fear, scream extract, lost souls. What are you doing? Sarah cried out as she backed away from him. He stepped forward slowly, his eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. You wanted to know what makes my burgers so special. It's not just meat, it's everything that has ever been lost or forgotten. Tom felt bile rising in his throat as he realized what he meant. You're using people, Mr. Grayson's smile widened as he nodded slowly. Every last one of them has contributed to my success. The shadows began to close in around them again, whispering secrets and promises of despair that filled their minds with horror. They could feel cold fingers brushing against their skin as they desperately searched for an escape route. Think about it, Mr. Grayson continued, his voice low and hypnotic. You can either join me in serving this town or become part of my recipe. With that chilling ultimatum hanging in the air, Tom grabbed Sarah's hand and pulled her towards a side door they had noticed before, a narrow exit that seemed to lead into darkness beyond. Come on, he shouted as they raced towards it. But just as they reached for the handle, Mr. Grayson's voice boomed behind them like thunder. You can't escape your fate. As they flung open the door and plunged into darkness beyond the threshold, they heard his laughter echoing after them, an unsettling reminder that the last takeaway was more than just a restaurant. It was a place where nightmares came to life. And somewhere deep within Croydon's shadows, countless souls lingered waiting for their chance to escape, just like Tom, Sarah, and Jake. To be continued. The last takeaway, the final bite. As Tom, Sarah, and Jake stumbled through the narrow door, they found themselves in a dimly lit alley that seemed to stretch endlessly into the night. The air was thick with an unnatural chill, and the distant sounds of Croydon felt muffled, as if they were in a world apart from reality. Where are we? Sarah panted, glancing back at the door, which now appeared to be sealed shut. the flickering light of the last takeaway barely visible through the cracks. "I don't know, but we have to keep moving," Tom urged, taking the lead as they navigated the narrow passage. Shadows danced along the walls, and the oppressive darkness felt like a living entity, pressing in on them. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from the depths of the alley. They froze, hearts racing. "What was that?" Jake whispered, his eyes wide with fear. Before anyone could respond, a figure emerged from the shadows, a gaunt man with hollow eyes and a twisted smile. He stepped forward, revealing a tattered apron stained with grease and something darker. "Welcome to the other side of the last takeaway," he said in a rasping voice that sent shivers down their spines. "I'm just one of many have tasted Mr. Grayson's secret recipe." Tom's stomach churned as he realized this man was yet another victim of the takeaway's sinister legacy. "We need to get out of here," he said urgently. The man chuckled softly, his laughter echoing eerily in the confined space. "You think you can escape? Once you've tasted his food, you're bound to this place. It's a curse." "Curse?" Sarah echoed, panic rising in her voice. "What do you mean?" "The essence of fear and despair that fuels his recipes binds us here," he explained, his voice growing more frantic. "We are trapped souls, forever part of his twisted menu." Just then, the ground beneath them began to tremble, and the alley walls seemed to close in. The shadows thickened, swirling around them like a storm. "You must choose," the gaunt man shouted over the chaos. "Join us or fight back." Tom clenched his fists. "We won't let him take us. We have to find a way to stop him." With renewed determination, they pushed past the gaunt man and continued down the alley, searching for an exit. The darkness writhed around them, whispering temptations and threats that clawed at their minds. Finally, they reached a dead-end, a brick wall covered in strange symbols that pulsed with an otherworldly light. "What is this?" Jake asked, feeling drawn to the symbols. "They're wards," the gaunt man explained, his voice urgent. "They can repel Mr. Grayson's power if you can activate them." Tom stepped forward and traced his fingers over the symbols. "How do we activate them?" "You must confront your fears," the man said, his eyes filled with desperation. "Only then will the wards protect you." Sarah took a deep breath. "We can do this together." As they joined hands, each of them focused on their deepest fears. Tom thought of losing his friends. Sarah envisioned being trapped forever in darkness, and Jake recalled the haunting whispers that had followed him all his life. With every ounce of strength they had left, they channeled their fears into the symbols. The light began to glow brighter, illuminating the alley as it pushed back against the encroaching shadows. Suddenly, Mr. Grayson's laughter echoed through the alley once more. "You think you can escape? You belong to me." But as he stepped into view, the wards flared with energy, creating a barrier between him and the trio. He snarled in frustration as the shadows recoiled from the light. "Your little tricks won't save you," he bellowed, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. With newfound courage, Tom shouted back, "We won't be part of your recipe. We refuse to be your victims." The wards pulsed with power, and the shadows writhed violently as if caught in a storm. The gaunt man joined them, raising his hands to amplify their energy. "Together," he urged. In that moment, they unleashed a wave of light that surged toward Mr. Grayson. The shadows screamed as they were pulled back into the darkness from which they came, and Mr. Grayson's expression twisted from anger to fear. "No, you can't do this," he cried out as the light enveloped him. With one final burst of energy, they pushed forward, forcing Mr. Grayson and his dark magic back into the depths of the last takeaway. As he vanished into the shadows, the oppressive weight lifted from their chests. Breathing heavily, they stood together in silence as the last remnants of darkness faded away. The alley was now bathed in warm light, and they could hear distant sounds of laughter and life returning to Croydon. "We did it," Sarah whispered in disbelief. Tom smiled at her and Jake. "We're free." The gaunt man looked at them with gratitude shining in his eyes. "You've broken the curse for all of us. Thank you." As he began to fade into a soft glow, Tom felt a sense of closure wash over him. "Goodbye," he said softly. With one last glance at their surroundings, Tom, Sarah, and Jake turned and walked back toward the main street of Croydon. The last takeaway was now just a distant memory, a reminder of what they had faced together. As they stepped out into the bustling streets filled with laughter and life once more, they knew they had not only escaped, but had also reclaimed their freedom from fear. And somewhere deep within Croydon's shadows, the echoes of the last takeaway faded away, leaving behind only whispers of a time when darkness threatened to consume them all.